You're listening to Solar Insiders, a fortnightly podcast that shines the light on the world's biggest energy source. Solar Insiders is presented by Giles Parkinson, the editor of Renew Economy, and Sophie Vorath, the editor of One Step Off the Grid. And Solar Insiders is brought to you by Pylon, the essential solar design tool to grow your solar business with quick and effortless proposals that will impress your customers.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Solar Insiders. I am Sophie Vorath and I'm the editor of Renew Economy and One Step Off the Grid. And with us today again this week this fortnight, I should say, is Kait Williamson, our lead reporter at Renew Economy and all of our publications, to be quite frank.
Hi, Sophie. How you doing?
Very well, and you?
Very well.
It's a little chilly in Melbourne.
I think the last time we talked, it was also cold here. So
yeah.
I
should find a new topic.
Put a ban on talking about Melbourne weather ever.
Fine, but it's kind of the rules, isn't it? You have to talk about the weather. Anyway, moving on. We are going to get on to the news of the week and such and so forth after we hear from our podcast subject, our interviewee this week, who was Kait Williamson, another Williamson, no relation, I don't think,
no.
Who is from Flow Power. She's the head of community and stakeholder engagement at Flow Power, which is one of these very interesting alternative retailers and is really focused on working with communities, particularly in the regions, to find bespoke, renewable energy focused products, basically. So, and the main topic we discussed this week was Community Renewables Newsstand, which has been a really fascinating project going for many, many, many years. I think you've written about it, Rach. I've certainly written about it in the past, but it's been a really huge success. And Kait's one of those people who is a bit really valuable in the industry at the moment, because she's working with the people that, rather than just sort of saying what people want and doing surveys and that kind of thing. She's actually out there talking to people quite a lot and hearing what they like and don't like about renewable energy. And one of the really interesting things we discussed is how projects like this, which really revolve around quite small, comparatively small projects in communities, small, 5 megawatt scale solar farms, batteries, combined with rooftop solar and storage, are a really great way to link people in or loop people into renewables, and to make them not feel so on the outer. You've got some really great connections in this sort of community engagement space, don't you, Rach? More in the larger scale.
Yeah, more on the larger scale end. I feel like every time I speak to someone, they're also asking me, what are you hearing on the ground? What?
Yeah. Do people hate us?
What are you hearing? I'm saying, no, you're supposed to be telling me what's happening.
Well, I think, we'll listen to what Kait says in a minute, but it's pretty encouraging insofar as it's actually quite simple. People want to be listened to and feel heard, and they don't want us to, they don't want things to be dumbed down either. They want to be told all of the stuff, and we need to have a bit more faith. I say the industry needs to have a bit more faith that people can cope with it. Obviously there's a lot of complexity and all of that stuff, but I think people would rather hear that than feel like they're being
ignored,
humoured, or I think being sort of glossed over and sort of given the oh, you're a funny little regional person and I'll just tell you all the bits you need to know. Anyhow, let's hear from Kait, and we can discuss further after the interview. This is Kait Williamson, the head of community and stakeholder engagement at Flow Power. Kait Williamson, welcome to Solar Insiders.
Thanks so much for having me, Sophie.
Now, we've got you here because you are very much involved at the Newstead Community Energy Project, which properly launched last year with the backing of Flow Power, and, led by Flow Power, I should say. And it's been a really interesting project, one of the really early community energy projects. Newstead's been a real centre of renewables and setting an example for a lot of other communities. We've followed a lot on Renew Economy and One Step Off the Grid, but I think we've got you here to give us an update on how it's all going since the launch, and maybe starting with a bit of an origin story of how it all started, because it's been a journey.
Yeah, that sounds great. The Newstead Community Energy Project is such a special project. It was led by Renewable Newstead, which is a committee of local residents, and these local residents are incredibly ambitious and consistent in their vision to kind of take the dream that they originally had and bring it into reality. And that aim was to generate renewable energy locally and to decrease their carbon footprint. So that's
We should say, sorry, whereabouts is Newstead?
Newstead. It's just a couple of hours outside of Melbourne in regional Victoria. So this community, super special in the way that they sort of initiated and kickstarted this project, which I think it was first conceived back in 2008, which is, I think, a testament to how much time, work, dedication, and energy, it takes to bring something, fully from an idea, all the way through to completion.
And the motivation behind it, was it mainly environmentally focused, or was this we want to have better control of our power and a more sort of reliable supply?
Yeah, I think probably a bit of both. And I think in terms of generating their own energy locally, I think that was a key focus for them. And reducing the carbon footprint was also a focus. But additionally, kind of taking, as we kind of see today is a big topic lately, taking the power into their own hands of, where their energy is coming from. How their community can have access to that as well.
And where did Flow Power come into the equation?
Yeah, good question. So in 2019, I'll probably start just giving another shout out to Renewable Newstead. They did so much work to secure a $1.1 million grant from the Victorian state government, which was a great kickstart and catalyst to then being able to search for an appropriate partner. So in around 2021, they did, I think it was a national search, and after that, Renewable Newstead engaged Flow Power after having, multiple discussions, obviously, and doing their research on who they think would be best to partner with on this sort of project. So we sort of, I think, formally engaged around 2021.
And that was more of about how do we make this work, as far as liaising with the distribution network, making sure people get the benefits of the power and so on.
Yeah, I think community energy, it kind of takes on a mix of different models and a mix of different elements, in different communities. And for Newstead, I think what it meant for them is that they were interested in sort of getting things moving, but then they wanted a partner to assist in, delivering the project and then operating the project, afterwards as well.
Because it's very complex, isn't it? I mean, there's the part that where you're sort of financing and installing the hardware, the solar panels and the battery storage, but then all the other bits connecting to the grid and running it are pretty complicated for the most sort of experienced and dedicated people.
Oh, definitely. And it's, taking so much time and effort to go through, the process since ideation in 2008, it kind of makes sense for a community to, maybe want to, in some instances, find a partner, that it can build, own, and operate, the energy project moving forward, because then that sort of takes the risk out of it for the community as well.
And for Flow, is that, an easy investment, or is that sort of do we have to weigh it up, and is it I mean, it's not necessarily a no-brainer investment, is it?
No, yeah, I think the power in this project is that there were multiple stakeholders that came to the table, to really make this project work for all parties involved, and that includes the community, of course, and the dedication they had, but also the government, and the funds that they were able to grant and provide, and then Flow Power, as both a retailer, but and an energy developer as well. So I think that's where you see multiple parties working together, for this optimal outcome, and I think that's a really good example of the power of that.
And so when we say that the Newstead Community Energy Project launched last year, what was it when it launched? What with solar storage, how many people involved? Can you give us a bit more of that detail?
Yeah, sure. So last year in 2024, the site was officially opened after construction and installation, and so the generating capacity is 3 megawatt hour.
And that's a solar.
Yeah, that's the solar farm, and then the battery. There's a battery on it as well, which is 5 megawatt hour. So, and that amount, while it's sort of a modest project, it more than surpasses the amount that Newstead would need as a community.
Okay, and so the power is for the entire town. Is that the way it works, or is it do people have to sign up?
Yeah, so there's two sort of elements of Flow Power's business model, one as the retailer and one as the developer. And so the way that it works is that the solar farm and battery basically can offload to local network, and the battery allows for this to be done at different times of the day depending on demand as well, which also puts pressure on the wholesale price when we're able to load shift when that energy is required or being used. And so part of it goes back to the local network. And then to kind of close out that circle as a retailer, we are able to have a sort of special offering for the Newstead community. And they can then they make their own decision on whether they would like to sign up to our residential product or not. But then the residents can then have their energy if they choose to go with Flow Home and have their renewable energy essentially from the local network, which is pretty cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And has the buy-in been good?
Yeah, definitely. I think we have over 75 signups in the community so far, and I think we're really excited and motivated by that number. And I think Renewable Newstead as a company has also been really supportive, in the offering that we're able to work with them and assist them as well in setting things up for individuals in the community. So, and also small businesses. So it's not just residential. We also, sell the energy to, sort of small businesses or commercial clients additionally. And I think one thing that's good to note is that for every kilowatt that's used in the community, we send the equivalent amount back to the grid. So it's a very interesting sort of symbiotic relationship that we've created between their use and the network as well.
So as far as, with this 75 people that have signed up, are you expecting that to continue to grow and is there a plan to then also maybe grow the system?
So I guess the short answer is that there's no plans to make this specific site any bigger, but we definitely would consider, maybe replicating something like this, in another area or in other communities. And in terms of the numbers that you asked, in terms of growing that, yes, certainly we definitely hope to grow those numbers. And our residential team definitely is very much in touch with the community members there. And so, keeping that open relationship, I think, with the community is something that I think Flow Power and also me individually, I really value driving those relationships from a consistency perspective and also from, just an authentic place of, what the community members need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine this kind of data, if you want to give it such a sort of cold name, is like gold for a lot of energy companies out there at the moment who, because there's so much change going on and there's so much, the relationship between retailers and customers is really changing very quickly. And knowing how to manage these and how to connect with customers and to not drive them off, basically off the grid is going to be really important. Knowing what they want and, what level of buy-in and how simple they want these products to be and that kind of thing, really, really important. And, I think out in the regions, this kind of work is even more important because there's this whole narrative about large-scale renewals and the heavy lifting regions are doing for that. I know out New South Wales there's been some conflict over transmission work and wind farms as well. This is a really good way to connect people with the renewable energy transition at the very base level. And, it's not going to solve the problems of social license for large-scale projects, but it is a way of making people feel like they're a part of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think also we aim to just think strategically as well about the impact that sort of community benefits as well have in certain areas. I think we very much, Flow Power takes a place-based approach, towards our community engagement, both the actual engagements themselves, but also the benefits, that are sort of created in these areas. And I think really listening to what's needed in specific communities or what community groups have to say is so critical in understanding what's actually needed. And obviously with Newstead, they're such an ambitious group, who kind of knew what they wanted, and so the offerings, that we have for that community were sort of born out of, listening to what they wanted to be a part of, and what they wanted for their community, as a part of the project.
Given they were so proactive and such a big part of this project, what will be your approach? Because you mentioned that, you have ambitions to replicate this in other communities. Are you talking about other communities that are also have their own interests, or are you hoping to be able to now, with your learnings, go into communities and say, look, this is what we could do. Is anyone interested?
Yeah, I think, look, we're probably very flexible on what the model should be like and happy to explore similar models, but maybe different avenues as well. So certainly we would want to do more community projects maybe that are in the same vein, but it might not look exactly the same, as it does in Newstead, as it might in another community. And I think from our perspective, we would maybe aim to do something that's maybe progressive or something that, hasn't been done before, as well. Because I think this is also how the Newstead project sort of was born as well for Flow. It was something we wanted to try to do, something that hadn't necessarily been done before, which was building a solar farm or energy project that then has direct benefits back to the community. So I can't speak for other companies necessarily, but I know that the model can be sort of flexible but somewhat replicable in various communities. So I think if there's appetite in communities, surely we'd be open to that discussion. And it also depends on, what the community is after in terms of what they want their benefits to be as well.
Yeah. And, does it necessarily have to take as long as it's taken? Obviously they started so way back in the early 2000s, which would have, be part of the reason. But I presume that with the work that you've all done, that some streamlines have been found and that it wouldn't necessarily, take 15 years anymore.
Actually, I'm not sure exactly how long it might take for some of these projects, but I still would say it would take a fair bit of time, from ideation through to completion, because there's so much work, I think, that certain maybe community groups might have to do to understand their motivation or viability for doing, something like this. Like, it's pretty amazing, that the Newstead community is so connected on their motivation and ambition to see this through like a vision. It's pretty incredible. So I think there definitely would still be a long lead time for something like this, depending on what type of community or what type of vision that community has for a project like this. But certainly, yes, there's probably some learnings, of course, that we could take through to operational phase of a project like this. And one thing I think, speaking for myself, I think from the perspective of what could be changed, I think funding, that's made more available as well by governments, to get things kickstarted is also super important and like a critical step to seeing these types of projects come to fruition, or at least get going, in the first instance.
Yeah. And there's broader benefits to it all too, isn't there? I mean, there's also a lot of talk about grid resilience out in the regions, and also about making better use of the distribution network. So sort of not putting so much emphasis on the transmission and big, huge projects that need, new poles and wires to connect them and all of that kind of thing. So this is another selling point, I suppose, of these kind of projects, is that they can bolster grids in that parts of the grid where maybe they're not, the power supply can be a bit iffy. They can also, work with distribution companies to shore up parts of the grid where they need to be shored up and that kind of thing. So, is that something that governments should be paying more attention to?
Yeah, I think it's certainly something to note in terms of demonstrating like decentralized energy. So at Flow, we have like a lot of small projects that have, DC coupled battery systems to support the grid. And I think some of these smaller projects, where their power is also that they, support the grid, but also they fit beautifully into existing infrastructure, right? So there's no upgrades, or, you don't have to build extra power lines, and they can kind of go up relatively quickly in terms of, timelines, in terms of like in relation to the general timelines for an energy project. So I think these types of projects can be a little bit more nimble in terms of how they're built, the support they provide, and then plugging into existing infrastructure, which, again, I think is a good news story for lots of people when they hear that there's no real upgrade to the power lines, that's required, or no power lines that have to be built in the process of something like this.
And no sort of huge bit of infrastructure that everyone has to agree on and
yes,
negotiate over. And I think, as you were saying before, bringing the communities in and actually having a benefit that is tangible for them, I think is another big deal, because a lot of these are really big projects. It's like, well, this is power for the city, and this is power, for the, the broader grid that just kind of goes into the whole mix. Whereas when you have a project like this, you can see some of the benefits more locally, and, in that sense, it makes more sense to people. If they're part of it, then they're not going to feel as much angst, you would presume, against it, and feel sort of left out, which I can imagine a lot of people would do.
Definitely. I think, we also still, throughout the operational phase of the project, want to be a good and active member of the community. And I think that long-term relationship building with the people who have kickstarted and initiated and led this type of project is also super important, and coming from that authentic place, I think, allows for us to also build on additional community benefits, perhaps, and keep that open relationship and keep talking about maybe what's needed in the areas we work. So certainly very important.
Yeah. And what are Flow's ambitions in this space? Generally speaking, is this really a core part of the business for you guys?
Like, I think we definitely have a track record in sort of community energy projects. And I think we do that because it's sort of aligned with our own ethos, but we also see it that's very aligned with some of the customers we work with, because like I said, there's a retail side of the business, where we're selling renewable energy packages, residential products in Victoria as a start, but mainly also commercial and industrial clients. And some of our clients also are keen to push things forward in community energy, which I think is a really awesome thing to see from that perspective too. And so, yeah, we definitely have done a couple projects that have tried to demonstrate what's possible, Newstead being one of them. But maybe another one that's actually worth noting is our Shoalhaven project. And that's the first one where there was a community group that wanted to see a solar farm realized. And so we helped to establish sort of a community fund that allowed local community to invest in the project. And that sends benefits back to those community members, but then City of Sydney, for example, off takes a lot of that energy. So I think that's also an important thing to note, is that there are also other models in different sort of mechanisms that can be explored. But it's great to see that we're very invested in sort of community energy, but also our clients are also invested in community energy and want to see how that can benefit where they're receiving their renewable energy from.
And this is the beautiful thing about distributed solar and storage, is that, and other technologies too, that they can be, so bespoke. They can be cater to needs of different people and do what different people need and different communities need. And that's something that we should definitely be making more use of, I think, rather than it's now, we can stop thinking of there being one energy solution for everyone and start thinking about, well, what works best here and what do these people want?
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a bit earlier, but I think personally I've witnessed sort of the cost of living or, rising energy prices are a big concern for a lot of people right now. And I was recently in a couple of different communities, and that was the main topic of conversation, if I'm honest. So I've seen this sort of I've witnessed sort of an increase in this discussion over time, and I think people are wondering, okay, how can I take sort of some of this outcome perhaps into my own hands or our own hands, from a local community perspective. And I think that's a really important thing to touch on.
It is, and it's really nice to see too that it does extend beyond people. And I don't mean just investing in rooftop solar and maybe battery storage for themselves. It's nice to see this community approach, which is also another thing that we all talk about, is not leaving anyone behind and equity and that kind of thing, because not everybody can invest in rooftop solar and storage. So it's great to see that, while I'm sure a lot of the Newstead households do have solar, it's great to see that it's thinking beyond that. It's thinking, well, as a community, how can we also make it better for everyone and lower prices for everyone?
100%. I think that's a really, really important point, because there's also, it's access, but there's also transparency. So I think those two things go hand in hand. In terms of access, at Newstead, for example, if you have sort of our residential product, regardless of whether you're a renter or a, homeowner, you have access, to competitive prices, for the residential package or product, that you've purchased.
Yeah, and you can have that feeling that you're using solar on a sunny day.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't, I think, maybe that sort of closes any socioeconomic, gap that might be apparent, in other areas of the energy sector. And I think there's the transparency thing, I also think goes hand in hand with this, because at Newstead, the tools that we have that we also try to provide to our customers, we sort of want to just show people what's possible with households when they're actually empowered to take control of their usage. And I know that transparency has been sort of a large topic of conversation as well. There's been a lot of news articles and and just voices that talk about that the energy market lacks transparency. So I think when you're doing community energy, there's also a real opportunity there, for open discussion and conversation, and people, asking, how much is, something producing, or, what is this? How do I, maybe if I shift my usage from here to here, how is it going to impact my prices? And so I think, those are all really, really good discussions to have.
Absolutely, and so empowering, because that you're exactly right. And I think that's going to be a big issue with this sort of focus on VPPs and on the one hand, all of this technology and change is really good news for consumers, but it's also still way too complex and way too opaque. And if you can start a conversation and have a retailer who's really open to discussing all of this stuff, and to so that people in the community can even have conversations about it and share little bits of knowledge, it's fantastic, and it needs to be a lot more of that.
100% agree.
I was going to wind up by asking, how does I detect an American accent? How does somebody who I assumed is from the US wind up working for a retailer in Australia with a wonderful community focus and getting up projects in regional Victoria?
Yeah, great question. You detected correctly. I am from the US, and it's a very interesting story. I've been in Australia for about 9.5 years, and career-wise, I'd say I started in sort of the international development and social impact space. And after working in that space, I worked in a bit of consulting, moved to Australia, and I actually worked as well for an oil and gas company previously, which was where my energy experience sort of started. But through sort of a passion for, a greener world and renewables and how we can make this work for us in Australia, being so abundant in sunshine, for one. I was really interested in sort of fusing the two, being in energy and renewables, but then also this sort of social impact space. And so for me, that's sort of how I wound up in this role, which I think very much focuses on how can we bring positive social license, social impact, community benefits to the areas in which we work. But, also bringing renewable energy to the forefront.
Yeah, well, we are very grateful to have your skills and your passion here, Kait. You can stay here as far as I'm concerned. And to Flow Power as well. And we, we'll have to have sort of regular check-ins, I think, to see how you guys are going and what else is being developed and how Shoalhaven and Newstead are progressing. I think they're really, really interesting projects, and as you say, they are getting some really important data and interaction with people who are really super important to this whole transition. So yes, thank you so much for your time today, and we will speak to you sometime in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Bye now. That was Kait Williamson from Flow Power, a really interesting discussion, and it's always great to hear from people who are amongst it in the regions, talking to people. And Newstead's in a funny spot in Victoria. It's been obviously a super engaged community who got it all started themselves. They've really led it, and Flow was brought in to deal with some of the more technical sides of things and to take on the risk, of course. But not, all around Newstead, there's not, people are not so wrapped with renewables. There's, some transmission line argy-bargy, and there's some wind argy-bargy in that same area. And as I was saying to Kait, I think it's really valuable having all sorts of people out there, even if we're not talking about big renewables or big transmission lines, just talking about energy could only be a good thing. Do you think, Rach?
I think that having people out there who are willing to listen is the key thing, because where I think so often what we hear is people saying, "Oh, the first I heard about it was a letterbox drop," and it's
My neighbour told me.
oh, my neighbor told me. It's like, well, when's the best time to hear about it?
And when you do hear about it, don't leave people to stew for ages after that, and then imagine also all the worst stuff. There needs to be a very quick follow-up and a chance to ask all the big questions and the little questions and can face the concerns.
Even questions that you might think are stupid, because that was what the New South Wales Energy Ombudsman said I think it was last week, the Australian Energy Week conference, and she was raising all of these concerns that people had.
Because she's done a big review, hasn't she?
Yeah. And so she was raising all these concerns that people had raised. And you look at some of them individually and say, well, that's stupid. Why would an energy company do that? But if you've never had this sort of offer or this sort of approach or this sort of project near you, they can be very, very valid concerns.
And look, I think there has to be some acceptance as well that, mistakes will be made. We need to probably also have little tolerance of mistakes that are made over and over and over again. Perhaps a bit more learning from mistakes. But yes, it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be probably a better way you could do it, or people will tell you there's a better way you could have done it. But the point is more conversations between, within the industry, more conversations with the people that it's affecting. All of this has got to be helpful. And we've got to sort of use all of these learnings. One of the interesting things that Kait pointed out was that even on the smaller scale, when it's not such big projects, and so the community benefits aren't, huge. We're not talking hundreds of millions or tens of millions that people need to decide on. She says that from community to community, what they want is so different. So some of them say we don't even want a community benefit fund. We've just got these one or two projects that we want money to go into, and it's obvious when you think about it. Of course, it's going to be different from community to community, but I think too often it's easy to try and make a little cookie cutter solution and go in with that. But I think that it pisses people off, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, if this is their one opportunity to get some meaningful funding into the town, they don't want someone telling them how to do it or where they should put it or, But it's all very interesting. Now, moving on from community energy, we've had a couple of big announcements this week about gas and electrification. So we had Victoria make their next move on their gas substitution roadmap, although it was really packaged as a gas security, I forget the word they use now, but basically because of all the carry on about we don't have enough gas in the market for the East Coast, yes, it was packaged more as here's how we're making sure we have enough gas for power generation and for industry. And, Victoria's come under such a lot of criticism from gas lobby groups and also from mainstream media for their quote unquote vilification of gas, when in fact I would say they're doing a very good job getting it out of houses for this very, for various reasons. But one of the key reasons is that, yes, the less we use in our houses, which is a really inefficient and really expensive use of gas, the more is freed up for industry and for, the peaking power plants that we need in our little spiky grid at the moment. Yes, so I think that was a really good call. Basically, they've said that all new houses now, because it used to be there was a few loopholes before. So I think from next year, all new houses will have to be all electric, which is great. And they're also going to start phasing out gas hot water systems. So when they come to the end of their life, they have to be replaced with an electric system. There are some exceptions to that. But I think the outcry from probably the green groups and the efficiency groups was that they didn't include heat pump air conditioning, which was
I did think that was a bit strange because gas space heating is so expensive. I've had a couple of different friends this winter say to me, these are not poor people saying we're not using our heating right now because it's so expensive.
Yeah, well, that's it. I'm not sure of the reasoning for that. The one thing that they did say in the release was that it can be, is the important part, just the sort of same price to replace your dead gas water. To instead of getting another gas water heater, get an electric one. So I think what they're maybe saying is this is less of a scary price thing for people. Whether or not that's entirely accurate, I couldn't say. And the other point is I think they're a bit further ahead on the regs and everything for hot water and a bit further ahead. So, whether that they've just decided, because, people do freak out. They freak out when governments tell them what to do. Victoria's done a lot of that, and Victorian people are a bit antsy about it now. But this is, it's a really good policy, and arguably they could have done the aircon as well. But I think they're just sort of thinking, their thinking is, let's not overwhelm people. Let's do one appliance at a time. I'm sure the aircon will come. But what they did do, which I thought was fantastic, is they've made it both those things for rental properties. So essentially, if you're not an owner-occupier, if you have a rental property and the gas heater dies, it has to be replaced with an aircon.
I think that was the absolute standout part of that piece of legislation. That will be the real game changer, because you've said a number of times in the past, and so many people do, how do you get rental properties up to a fair standard? And it seems like that is the stick that is going to be needed to encourage landlords to then bring landlords in and say, okay, well, actually you can do these other things too, and we will subsidize those.
Yeah, and that's it. There's plenty of supports, and that's really important to mention. So they're not just doing this and going, oh, too bad and suffer the cost. We have the boosted Victorian Energy Upgrade Scheme. We have Solar Victoria that's offering rebates for all sorts of things. And I think, again, that might be why they went with hot water first, because there are a few more rebates on offer for that. But yeah, I think the focus on rentals is fantastic. It doesn't just stop there. It's at the start of every new lease, any rental property that doesn't have proper insulation has to have it put in. Same goes with draft blocking. So if you've got your old, like I do in this house, bizarre air vents in your wall, I'm not sure what they do aside from freeze you. They have to be fixed. They have to be filled. So yeah, it's some really, really sensible, I would say pretty fair measures that, they bring in all those people who have had very little say in the matter for a very long time. So I give, I'm going to say 4 stars out of 5 for that policy. If they could have brought in aircon, that'd be great. But I get why they're sort of doing a bit of a gently, not to piss everybody off. And then Sydney has gone and done a similar thing. So, they've followed up on the recommendation from the Greens, I think, to ban new gas in new buildings. And I think it's across the board. I think there's definitely
exceptions, but
in some of the industrial, and I think food and bev are being left out a bit because they're already probably up against it at the moment. So
that, and who's going to take a gas burner away from a chef?
I know. I know. At your own peril. God, I can remember flying pans of hot pasta, and that was just because someone changed their order, So look, these things are happening, and I think the message too is that the more policies like this happen, even people who don't have to do it but maybe have the means will do it anyway. They will get this message and say, well, hell, there's some some subsidies out there. There's a little bit of help, and I've got solar. Why wouldn't I change my gas heater when it breaks down to an aircon? So I think they're hoping that it'll just kind of build that momentum and things will just keep going on. But yes, it's been good news this week. I've liked it.
I think the pressure is now on Queensland because they came out with their $26 million solar for renters.
Oh, yes.
Supercharged solar for renters
in the budget.
Funding in the budget. But they don't have the policy details drawn up yet. So
they've got the headline, damn it.
They've got the headline. They've got the money. They don't actually have the details. I'm interested to see what they actually come out with to say, is it just going to be, here's $3,500 for a landlord to put some rooftop solar on? Or is it going to come with something like remove some kind of gas appliance or do some insulation or some kind of, other things to go with that?
So it's not just a bang solar on your roof, but everything else can stay really sub-average. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point, and we do hope to see it. It was one of the few sort of the diamond in the rough of the Crisafulli when their election promises. It was there then. So yes, they do need something to offer someone in clean energy at the moment, although we have had a couple of big wind projects approved as well lately in the Sunshine State. So things are happening. It's just all a bit unpredictable. And who needs predictability, right? Not investors. No. Not consumers.
You don't need predictability if you're not going to spend $1 billion on something.
Nah, not important. Yes, well, I think that's about all of the news. And the big thing coming next week, of course, is the battery rebate comes into play, and we will have plenty more on that to come. But so yes, please do stay tuned. Keep your eye on Renew Economy and on One Step Off the Grid for more news about that. We have a new Driven podcast coming out today, I believe, as well. So keep your ears out for that and your eyes, apparently, because we're doing video. Hooray. I can no longer get angry with my mum when she says that she watched a podcast. Damn it. All right. So, yes, we'll wind that up then, Rach. Thank you very much for joining me today. And I will thank our listeners and our readers and watchers and our sponsor Pylon, and we will see you in about a fortnight's time for the next Solar Insiders. Until then, bye.
Solar Insiders was brought to you by Pylon. Pylon provides easy-to-use solar design software for solar installers and retailers with pay-as-you-go pricing, no monthly costs and no lock-in contracts. Join Australia's top solar companies who trust Pylon to design high-resolution, CEC-ready solar proposals.